Wow. Hello, Shay, and welcome everyone who is joining us today on this beautiful day. I say beautiful because the sun's shining here in Melbourne, and we've had a bit of wet weather, which is great. And it's so good to be back with you, Shay. We've had a little sort of absence, and both of us have been busy doing other things, and so it's really great. Now, you said that Sovereign will be joining us soon.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to chat again this week. Sovereign will be joining us in about 15 minutes.
Wow, that's really,
Diving in.
really great. Well, I thought I would start the day off, or, this session off, by just reading what my team told me was really important for us to address. Okay, so what I got was ego persona versus soul path. Um, and I've really noticing of late how many people are finding this a difficulty, and that begins by realizing that it even exists, right? So the biggest challenge facing humanity to retrieve their sovereignty is the disentanglement of the web of fear and attachment driven by the need for survival of the ego personality, and then the replacement of total surrender and trust to the divinity of our soul path. And the death of identity of the ego personality is the requirement here. Now, they're pretty strong words. And I just want to know, Shay, from your perspective, that struggle with, that you have between the personality, the Shay part of you, right? That is asking to be constantly paid attention to, yes? And it's constantly needing to be validated, to be acknowledged, to be patted on the shoulder, to be taken care of, all of that, which takes so much of our energy. So then to say, well, we really need to let go of that attention to the physicality as being the only important thing in our life, and then transfer that to the only, the true importance is the life force within us and the purpose for the incarnation. And there is a tug of war going on there. We need to find a cohesive, co-creative, cooperative partnership between the two. That is the challenge right now. So how's that affected you so far in your life? Where have you noticed that?
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. And appreciate you taking the time to kind of, explore these, deeply psychological kind of and spiritual concepts of our being. And I am very much at the beginning stages of, really comprehending the magnitude of impact that this kind of distinguishing difference between ego and soul really has on my life. And I'm really grateful to be actually on this journey, and I enjoy these conversations with you every week because it just invites me, and why I really love doing this live, to share this with the world, because it invites more people to also just inquire that little bit more into ourselves, because it's like knowing thyself is the ultimate quest of this life as a being on this planet. And my journey has really, spent a lot of time growing up in far north Queensland, and being very active and very kind of physical, sports orientated, and very much all about competition. We've got to win at all costs. We've got to do what it takes. We've got to, go out there and prove ourselves, and prove it to our coaches and prove it to our teammates, and really play well. You got to perform. You got to do really, really well. And if you don't perform, then you're going to be out. You're going to be benched. You're going to be off the team. You're going to be out of the inclusion of this tight knit group of men, and you're going to be ostracized and outcasted. And so for me, like growing up with that kind of dynamic as a primary focus in my life as a young boy, I really, and because I found myself quite naturally excelling in these areas, I realized, I really looked at, because I took it so personally inside myself, that there was an insecurity and fear of not being accepted, and fear of not being, patted on the back and celebrated and given a certificate or a trophy or a medal, or, so there was like this void inside that if I don't do really well, then I'm not going to receive love. And so I always pushed hard, and I always tried to, perform in a way that I would be able to be recognized and be seen. It was my way of like being, having significance in as a young boy. And so as I grew older, that pattern played out continuously in my life, and it not just happened in the sports arena, but it kind of spilt over into other areas of my life, in my relationships, in my interactions with other male peers, and without any kind of connection or practice to recognizing that there is more to life than just me being at the center of the entire universe. I really, it took me to an extreme length of situations that I had, what I realize now, subconsciously manifested in my life to hit me really hard, to shake me up, and to make me realize, whoa, like, I have to be really humble, because I was being humbled in that moment through a course of injuries and, not being able to play sports anymore. So I went through a huge identity crisis, and realizing, wow, I actually don't have that much control of the outside circumstances, but what I can control is what's happening inside of me. And it was really humbling to go through that process of, taking time out to reflect on my behavioral patterns and my choices in life, to see whether I was, often at times acting out because my ego was needing to be praised or needing to gain significance, or if I want to choose to change that and look at, a new path forward that is more about contribution and more about love and connection, and listening, more of a listening into my body and into my my physical experience, as well as my emotional experience, and being able to express that openly and freely, to move forward, so that I can choose to create my life in a way that is in alignment with, what is really going to serve other human beings as well, not just taking what I need to fulfill me in this moment because I'm insecure and scared and in fear, but rather, how can I stay grounded in the truth of, our reality and our existence, which is so much more than a physical vessel and a physical being. But how can I, then from that place serve my community more? So I definitely want to highlight the fact here, Yvonne, that I am certainly still very much at the beginning of this journey, being a 29-year-old young man, and learning lots as I from other people like yourself, with so much wisdom of your life and so much practice. Because what I've recognized in the cycles of nature is that these old patterns generally reappear over time, and they come up again. And having the awareness and the choice to be able to choose, do I want to go, backwards in a sense in my journey and go back to where I was as a boy, or do I want to continue to heal these aspects of myself, and forgive, myself and my upbringing and my family and my parents, and really love, the responsibility that it takes to move forward with this deeper connection to the inner calling of the spirit of the human life, which definitely feels like it's easy again to talk about and to speak to, but it's definitely a long journey. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more from you, Yvonne, on your perspective of the distinguishing aspects of the ego persona and also the soul path that we have this opportunity to choose.
Wow, thank you for that. That is just, it's really valuable what you're saying, because it is so much everyone's, so many journeys are similar. And what I'm really noticing when I listen to you is that we are encoded, and that's the word they're giving me, encoded with this this part of us that seeks for the meaning of life. We all say, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Right? But we come into this density where from the moment that we draw breath, we are being programmed into a system that serves somebody else, not us. And as a result of that, we are then imprinted instantly with this fear of survival. So I always think the ego gets a really bad rep, because the ego is a very essential part of our physicality. It is designed to keep us safe. It is what is associated with the fight and flight, an action to keep us from knocking ourselves about, because as children we have no boundaries. We still believe that we are able to do everything and not harm ourselves, and of course in this, once we become dense, that is not the truth. So what happens is that right from the beginning we are programmed with this belief that yes, we're alive, but now we have to earn the right. So if you come back to this understanding that we are a spark of creation from Prime Creator, then that's a lie. Why would Prime Creator, send a spark of itself down here and then ask itself to earn it, earn the right to it? It just, none of it makes sense. And unfortunately, none of us ever question it. So therefore, it is so vital that we go back and have a look at how this is all put together, and have a look what is the ego personality, and then what is the soul path, and how can we bring them together. And as we do that, we have Souvereign joining us. Whoa. Well, this is a joy. Come on.
Hey, everyone. So wonderful.
Welcome. So long we haven't seen you. Wow, it's wonderful to see you. How are you?
I am on my soul path.
That is so good to know. Hey, like all of us.
Yes.
And Sov, I'm so excited because, as always, even though we haven't spoken for a while, we seem to be on the same tram. Because
isn't that just so peculiar, and yet at the same time not surprising?
It's called serendipity, and it's called synchronicity, and it's called all those things that we find ourselves in. And I'm just so excited. So I hope you will put in the chat a link to what you're about to do, this wonderful mini course.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, and so we'll talk about that a bit later. But so Shay and I have been chatting along, and I'm just addressing this identity, to have a look at what is the ego personality, and then what is the soul path, and how do we bring them together in synchrony, so that they stop going in opposite directions and they start working as one, because that ultimately is what is meant to be in the first place. So I'll just complete what I was speaking about, and that was that the ego is there to keep the personality, all right? So the Souvereign and the Shay and the Yvonne from hurting themselves, right? From harming themselves. And so it is constantly there to say, hey, no, don't do that, and hey, no, don't. The thing is that when that ego then creates this fear in us that we're not safe.
Yeah.
That as a persona we're not safe, And that becomes almost a foundational thing that we build everything else onto. I have to keep safe. And of course, that's been hijacked and go, oh, well, that's a very good thing. We'll just make people feel really unsafe. We'll tell them they don't have enough money. They aren't the right color, so they don't, they're already a victim. They don't have enough intelligence because we give them plenty of profit at the education system, and they have to go out and they have to work hard and labor hard and then pay us for the benefit of that, and often on and goes. And so we become so attached to and entangled with this ego personality to protect it, to keep it safe, that we lose contact with the meaning for our incarnated journey in the first place, and our soul path. And that's the journey that I want to talk about, because as I'm working with more and more people every day, I see the struggle. I see that people say, yes, but I have to pay the bills. And I say, well, don't. And then look horrified at me. And I said, well, the thing is, if you pay the bills, change the way you look at it and go, every bill that you get because they've trusted you with the service. If you don't want to pay for it, then don't have the service, get candles, whatever. We have to change the way we see things, and we need to come home to the knowledge and the knowingness that we are the expression of Prime Creator. And as such, we are the creators of everything. Yeah. Okay, over to you, Sol. Let's hear from you.
Well, you really like to stir the pot today, Yvonne, and it's so good that you do.
I love stirring pots.
Well, what comes up for me is that the only way to properly address this last part of, like, we are the prime creators, we are the expression of the divine creators. A lot of people in the spiritual world know this, and yet we're not fully there yet. And that is that space of being fully sovereign, being fully free, being fully, if life didn't offer us challenges, there wouldn't be that much growth. But we are operating in a hijacked matrix. And for as long as people don't comprehend trauma-based mind control, which is really everything that you described, you're saying, well, here's the ego, and the ego is trying to keep us safe. And then we unravel that a little bit, and it's like, there's these parts of self that form up the ego because there has been a lot going out of shape in our world. When we then get to how do we even get here, we realize, like, they are really easily playing in on that. But the question really is, are they playing in on it, or is it actually scripted and designed that way? And I can tell you from the study of Syntropy, which is the study of abundance in nature and how nature and life is naturally wired for cooperation and collaboration and thriving and building healthy ecosystems. We have been invested with a parasite culture that has hijacked humanity and has most likely, from the very early onset of trauma existing in humanity, really just gone into that. And they are indeed definitely making use of the function of the fear that an ego-based persona is operating on. But they're not just playing in on it. It was designed that way. It is made use of in the function. And the way to do that is to continue inducing trauma, because once you understand trauma-based mind control, well, you can control societal frameworks. You can control transgenerational trends in how things are going to be playing out. And so that's called social engineering. It's a study. It's something that is a almost defined science of the dark arts. And that then all of a sudden can have us look at the ego also from a light, well, it's so easy to just trample on the ego and say the ego is bad and it's not doing its job. Well, it's doing its job, but it's doing it out of trauma. But how did we get traumatized? Was that our choice? No, it wasn't our choice. So the awakening of our sovereignty comes part and parcel with the reawakening into what it constitutes to be a naturalized human being. And that's a human being operating on love, on fearlessness, which is the absence of fear, which is the fullness of love. But what sits in the way of us feeling like that and navigating like that, and therefore creating like the masterful creators that we are in this world like that, what sits in the way of that is this trauma-based mind control that wasn't just falling out of the sky just accidentally. No, it was designed this way. Our education system, our control mechanisms, and our top-down hierarchical systems of the so-called, I call it fantasy government, all of that are structures of a traumatized mindset. And they're all to extract wealth and energy out of our humanity. And the real question is that once we understand that, it's like, well, where do I cut those ties? Where do I say this transgenerational hand down of trauma, I'm going to be, this is where the buck stops. I'm going to draw that line for me. And that takes effort. But mostly what it takes willfulness. It takes a willingness to show up for the trauma, for what doesn't feel good, and be willing to potentially lose a lot of the comforts that we got so accustomed to. And whether we do that in a short form or a long form, the return to our own sovereignty and real fulfillment as it comes to the expression of who we came here to be is only held by the chains stuck to us of all the attachments we have to how we have to show up and how we have to be, and what people are expecting of us and how it works in society, all the stories that we have brought alive and that are alive all around us, that whole entourage of belief systems, they are all like ties and lines all connected to us. But when we look at the trueness of that image, it's actually us holding on to each and every one of those lines, because at some level they provide us certainty. At some level they hurt, they're poisonous, they're sickening, they're unfulfilling, they're all of these things, but we don't know what we are without those. We don't know it. We are more afraid of letting all of that go, which is pretty much the definition of trauma-based mind control. Traumatize a human being so that it will want to hold on to a scarcity position because it has so much fear of really processing and re-entering into the full freedom of wholeness. It has so much fear built up around it called trauma that it will hold on and keep self-harming itself. And so this is a big story, and you're stirring the pot in a very good way when we're starting to look at what are we responsible for, and with that, what are we responsible towards? And we are responsible towards all of it. Our relationships with any external authority, our relationships with any other human being on this earth, our relationship to ourselves and all those beautiful parts of ourselves, that once we understand the awakening of our willingness to start changing things, once we understand that, we are going to end up on a new path in a trajectory that will make the illusion of government and society be more clear than it was before. And we will have a newfound fearlessness to walk that path with others. And this is the great invitation that you and Shay and me are reaching out with to other people with. It's like a hand that we're reaching out and we're saying, here, we've walked this. There's things that we've come to learn. Take this hand and let's walk this path together, because the whole path to self-sovereignty and freedom is not a path that you walk by yourself. Yeah, you have to walk it on your own because you are your own person. But on the hero's journey, there never is nobody around. On the hero's journey, there always are the sages, the guides, the supporters, the treacherous demons that come up that actually also turn out to be the greatest blessings once we come through the precipice and the threshold that we had to cross.
Absolutely. Wow. When you come back with fervor. I love that. I have a but. I'm going to get a big but because all of that, yes, absolutely. But when Shay was talking earlier, and I'm going to bring that back, he mentioned, and he's mentioned it before, when he was on his trajectory of wanting to, of that ego personality wanting to be approved of and all of that, there was something inside of him that suddenly went bang. And he said, humbled himself, right? And there is encoded within each one of us the reason for our incarnation. We're not an accident. We're here because we're part of a movement, of a galaxy, whatever words you want to use, that is on the move to expansion. In whatever way that we can contribute to that. So I'm going to throw it to you in a moment, Shay, but I just want to share something really important here. That encoding that is within us, that steers us back onto the path of the purpose for being here, the meaning of life, which goes beyond paying bills, beyond anything. That is where we need to come, and that is what this awakening is about. Within each individuated spark of Prime Creator is a code that when it steers too far away from its intended incarnation, something brings you back. And every one of us who's on this hero's journey knows that it comes through crisis usually. So I want to share something with you very quickly. And that was the other day when I wasn't feeling great. And for those of you who remember, I had this infection in my eyelids. And that kind of made me a bit woozy. Not woozy so much as things weren't as clear as they could have been. And I'm driving my car and I could still see enough to drive. And I said to my team, I hope you guys are driving. And there was laughter and they said, "Oh, don't we always?" And my question then was, well, who was driving when I had that massive car accident? And the instant answer was, and I really want you to get this, we were driving the other car that hit you. Now let that sink. So had I not been who I am and as clearly aware and awake as the messages I get, I would have said, what the hell would he? But I just stopped and I went, thank you. Because at the time I had decided to go off track and I was in the mode of survival. I just turned 80. I thought, how am I going to continue to keep working and maintain my lifestyle the way I am? And I'd fallen into the trap of finding a way to make myself financially secure. And it was taking an enormous amount of time and effort and money. And that wasn't my path. But in that moment, when I was told we were driving the other car, I got it. I got it. And Shay, that's what you were talking about earlier. So I throw it to you. With that understanding of what I just shared for you, how you can then see that something is driving the other car to keep you back on track. Over to you.
Wow, thanks for sharing that, Yvonne. That's super powerful. And so good to see and hear you and feel you, Sovereign. I love the energy and the enthusiasm, brother. Yeah, that's powerful story, really. I mean, for me, we just started over the last 10 weeks practicing a kind of family ongoing circles, ongoing process. And just the last week, we shared this process where we got to really look at those states of reactivity and take a deep breath and create a bit of space, and then really ask the question, particularly when getting triggered by another person, whether it be the primary he or the primary she, or it be anyone that's causing this inner scarcity feeling of insecurity and fear. And instead of instantly reacting to it with rage or anger or frustration or procrastination or whatever it may be, asking, what are their needs that is, igniting them to, from my perspective, they're coming at me, they're trying to have this power over me. So asking the question, how can I fulfill their needs? And this is kind of going back to what I was sharing at the beginning around the soul path of looking from the perspective rather than the individual ego of me trying to, needy, I need all this stuff, but rather what can I, give, and how can I serve, and how can I meet their needs? And, and that's what I'm hearing from you when you're sharing this story around driving the car. It's like you're realizing that, you're asking those inner questions, and it's a really empowering position and standing to know, like, that I am responsible for creating everything in my environment, even the worst things that I could ever imagine, rather than being the victim and saying and pointing the finger and blaming all these outside stimulus and circumstances and governments and people and mother and fathers and whatever, but really taking responsibility for all of it within myself and saying, wow, even if there is something that is not quite fulfilled in the meaning of my life, reclaiming that and choosing to flick the switch on another way of being in the world, it becomes a choice. And something that I'd really love to hear, like Sovereign's perspective on this further as well, is looking at, because what I've noticed in today's modern world as well is that this is becoming a more relevant conversation, and more people are choosing to go down the soul path right now. They're really recognizing that this is an opportunity, and they're stepping up and they're going down the soul path. But something I want to inquire deeper into is looking at if potentially this hyper spiritualized, way of being in the world, is this becoming another way for the ego to identify with, to have significance? We're seeing all these self-help gurus with all these healers, all these, bells and whistles and, distortions, because it's becoming a massive industry across the world, let's say. And really finding that middle ground, because again, bringing it back to the family circle that I was sharing earlier, it's easy to say, I've been doing all this work and I'm, healing myself, and then really, that's when it's something most likely arise, to be humbled again, to realize, whoa, it's like, hang on a second, I'm just another human being on this journey, and I am, I am not better or worse. And the moment what I've realized, that I put someone else up on this pedestal as if, they're my savior and they're gonna, help me and be the one. Although I think it's relevant that we have teachers and mentors to guide us. The moment that I even put myself above others and tell them this is how it is and this is how it has to be, there's innately something out of balance there. And so I guess what I'm curious to explore in this, modern culture of consciousness that is like thriving and coming into being through more and more conversations and more people doing the practices and more people going deeper within themselves. How do we distinguish and know for ourselves if we're falling into this ego identity of, like, I'm a spiritual teacher and healer and I can save the world kind of radical, sort of perspective, as opposed to staying humble and serving and offering our, wisdom to benefit others from our own experience and our own journey of life, so that they potentially don't have to necessarily go through the extreme hardship that we've felt, but they can take nuggets of gold out and apply simple principles to their lives that may serve and benefit them in the long term and through their life. And just curious to dive into that aspect a little bit more, if you feel relevant to share there. So
inevitably, life will either present us these beautiful sledgehammers where we then, if we actually are smart enough to inquire and say, so, why did that accident happen? And then the team says, well, we were driving the other car for you. It either happens with that kind of sledgehammer energy, but it doesn't have to be like that. And it can just be a feather brush if we're just willing to pay attention. And so for me, it's a loaded question that seems to elicit maybe some nice, rant on my behalf, but I just have to bring it back down to the only way that I can explain this and how it all fits together, because I understand trauma-based mind control, and I have studied and researched what MK Ultra programming is and what all those black book CIA operations have all, and not to kind of enrich myself with like, oh, they're all evil. It's like, no, I genuinely want to figure out how they're socially engineering events, how they're socially engineering transgenerational succession that keeps us buying into the same lies packaged in different wrappings, that if you now get a flat screen television that has got 20 million pixels, your life's going to be better. And we all kind of know that that's not true, but the large swath of people going through the programming system is still so prone to it. And where this begins in our human ecology is at birth. And the primary birth violations that are the trespasses on the sovereignty of the free will of that individual spirited human being. So we're talking about a soul path. Well, once your soul comes in, it is in tiny baby form, and it kind of, it has a path. But what if at entry, your soul's entry into this world is actually arriving at a hijacked station, where your birth proceedings, when we look at what it should be in the natural order, in the continuum of life, no bright lights necessarily, no, oh, we have to get this baby out before the doctor goes home. Oh, you have to lay on your back because that makes it easier for us to see what's going on. No drugs, no interference, no, none of that. And then the women that may be listening is like, well, that's not what my birth was like. And I'm not saying that there was anything wrong. It's just that all the forms of unnaturally bringing children into this world has an impact. And where the impact is here, is where that cord and that source connection to life prematurely gets cut. And it gets cut as quick as possible. But the placenta is still life, filled with life and energy and transmission of codes and energy is all still having to come through. The part of what people are looking for them outside of themselves, because we have all ventured out and figured out, who am I? Who am I? The part we're looking for is will. It is our will, because what got cut out from never fully entering our navel port, from where we judge our yay or our nay, is our will. And that will is what people look outside of themselves for, because it was never allowed to properly enter in. And because it never properly entered in, because of a very smart and divisive way to teach humans how birth works in a standardized, westernized, programmed system, we now have our will that knows of its spiritual soul path, that is connected to its spiritual soul journey, that knows who it is. It never got in. Now, that may sound a little bit metaphysical, but I know for myself that when we restore our will, when we lift disdain from our navel port, when we reactivate our will and we start navigating with our willingness, that's when the game starts to change. Because then we realize that not only were we always in control, we were just not able to see it because we were not willing to see it, because we were traumatized, but we step out of victimhood into ownership. And that is a journey. And that's based on trauma-based mind control, something that takes something. What it takes is your willingness. And that will isn't gone forever. And we can never go and reach outside of ourselves to find it, because no television or movie or new sports car or whatever workshop that isn't promising you, hey, I've got will restoration on the table for you. This will be a will awakening workshop for you. I'm hosting one of those, by the way, just on a side note. When the will is freed of the damage and stain and story put over it, and the transgressions of our wills have been freed up, which is just a total liberative process, then all of a sudden we are able to feel again our true north. We are able to listen to those feather brushes, as opposed to waiting for the sledgehammer to come in and knock us from behind. And so I would say, don't study trauma-based mind control. Just start re-enabling your will and figure out how to do that, because not everybody needs to dive that deep. Because human nature isn't about understanding the dark side. It's understanding love and being that and being whole in that. And the way to be whole in that, for me, is really about will awakening, will restoration, so that our navigation becomes either a yay or a nay. And that would be my take on this rather complex subject.
Wow, thank you so much, and I'm loving it. And look, you make sure that you drop in how people can do your wonderful workshop on using the will to regain your sovereignty. I'd really like to take it to before I start talking, Shay. I know that your time is limited, so is it time for you to say goodbye to us soon? Do you want
Yeah, I'm gonna love you and leave you. Thanks for your time.
All right. So how
Enjoy
about
the rest of the
you want to
conversation.
give us some words of wisdom before you leave?
Oh, I'm not quite sure I'm qualified enough to share on such depth. I just feel really grateful, to be honest, for both of you, and not just sharing the accumulation of your life's work and your energy and your time, and diving deep into these subject matters, but also just your willingness of your life experience to actually really go there and experience it for us. And I sense that the as Souvereign had said, our ways of communicating has been hijacked through our screens. Here we all are on our screens for a positive reason, but when we go back through time, innately, naturally, we would have sat around and listened to our elders and our family members and our uncles and our aunts and our grandparents and so on, to learn the lessons that they've been through. And we would really, as a younger person, who is on the path of discovery and learning and journeying, we would really honor that the trials and tribulations that they've been through. And although we must go through it on our own as well, individually, there has been this disconnection and this loss of circle sharing and spending time and learning these really, as Sovereign said, this is quite deep conversation, complex, notions. And so why I'm sharing that and the relevance of this is I feel really grateful that we're, have this opportunity to flesh out further with, with the community who are all watching in now, who I'm sure there's many questions coming up for you guys as well as they are for me, because these conversations don't necessarily solve all of the, the world's problems overnight, but at least I feel, opening up the conversation to explore the nuances and the depth and the caliber of the niches that's involved in really exploring ourselves. Ultimately, this is not what's going on out there, but this is all happening here in me, because there's so much that you guys are sharing that I really resonate with, and that is like dropping in deep. And I'm like, wow, yeah, that's so true, and that's right. And I'm sure many people who are listening most likely feel the same way. And so I just want to thank you both. I'm really grateful. I'm going to love you and leave you both.
Thank
And
you so much for always being available, and until we join again soon. All right. Wow. So, Sav, I would like to take it back to that willingness that you were talking about, because before we finish, I would like to give some directives, some suggestions about how to reclaim what you said, was hijacked, but also this recognition for me on this journey that I continue to be on, is that when the persona, that we're talking about, the sovereign, Yvonne, when that is willing to surrender its attachment to the physical trinkets, to to the false beliefs that we have to have things for us to make us happy. When we are willing to actually stop and say, well, when I'm just working from this persona perspective, it's all a struggle. It seems to be all a struggle. Now, is that why I was incarnated? Is that why I'm here? No, it isn't. It doesn't have to be like this, as you have said several times today. And so then how can it be better? And it's simple. I have known for many of my clients who used to get really irritated with me when I'd say, it's really simple. It's just not easy. And that is all about this acknowledgement of willingness. I am willing to let go of the what you call trauma-based, the impregnated, conditioned programming of enslavement, and bring me to a place where I say to the part of me that did incarnate me, that is running me when I'm asleep, the life force, whatever name you want to give it, soul, God, Fred Nerd, for all I care. There is an energy force. And we go back to Star Wars and trust the Force, Luke. Okay, for me, it is when you are willing, and it's a leap of faith, willing to put aside all of these ideas. I need to have the best car and the best house and the best relationship, and then my children need to have the top of the class. And honestly, I've been there as a parent. I'm proud of my children, but what pressure do we put them under when we do that? Can we be just as proud when they're down there and they're eating mud pies? Yes. Mm-hmm. And that is just so essential. So to bring us back to this willingness of surrendering to why we came here to be, with a complete acceptance of unknowingness.
Mm-hmm.
From one moment to the next, I've got not a clue what my soul path is. But boy, I'm enjoying the journey. I'm enjoying the journey. It's like, wow. But when I sat and planned and thought, well, I have to do this so that I can have that, and I have to pay that so that I can have that, and I've got, my God, it was nothing but stress and struggle and goodness knows.
Mm-hmm.
Now I just say to my whatever life force, and I go, I think I need a little extra finance, because if I'm still to be living the life path, this physicality needs to be taken care of, so bring it on. And within minutes there is an influx of something, because that is what it is to surrender to a force that has a purpose for being here, that knows why it is, how it is best formed to expand in its fullness. And it is that signing up for that willingness to be the conduit of that energy, to bring the heaven to earth and to connect them together, to then have this ascension process into a higher realm of being. And that is what it takes. It's that willingness to surrender to a higher, not a higher power, because I'm not into this God knows, because to me religion has hijacked that word to the point where it's minimized enough to be small enough to stick in a matchbox. For me, this quantum field of energy, that is the field of all possibilities and opportunities, that is waiting for us to just help ourselves, to send the energy vibration to match that. I wrote about it this morning. We have to become a match, vibrationally, energetically, emotionally, in the mindset, to what we desire to be the greatest of ourselves. And that is when we bring the persona and the soul path as one, to work as one. That is where we're going into this new earth experience.
I love it, Yvonne. Yes, to the path ultimately leading to a reunification. And that's what I see is part and parcel of the journey. It's not a smart idea to tell the ego, whatever we want to call it, that it has to drop its own BS and stop doing what it's doing because it's no longer needed. Everything in life is performing a function with purpose. And so what happens in the process, because there's a lot of what you may call, I call them nouns. That's the best way to, so we call the ego has become this thing. And it's moved out of being a living form of expression. And even better, it's moved out of being a living formed expressingness of itself. Like, let's get as long and creative and verby with it, because as soon as we put it in a box, then it seems that often we end up chastising it for existing, which is exactly what, if you want to have a beef with those that design trauma-based mind control, it's exactly how it's designed. So we traumatize you, you get a little ego, and then you can go and abuse your own little ego, so we don't have to do it for you anymore. And by you abusing you, then we get actually what we want. We get to go and design the next big scandemic over yonder, so that we can just repeat this cycle of endless erosion. Really, that's what's going on, erosion of our humanity. But as you also indicated, and how the truth of nature really operates, is that when you deviate for too long, it's going to come just swing back. And this is just what's happening for humanity as a whole. We are, in the last 100 years, we've gone through an increase of distortions of proportions that are just out of this world. And the distortions are maybe not so much about how brutal the wars are of the past, maybe 10 years compared to how they were back in 1918. No, but the insidiousness of the distortions has created more diversification of trauma-based forms of manipulating and distorting human orientation. Look, the reality of it is that there is a real territory to reclaim for humanity. And I believe it's going to be in our generation, the regeneration, that that territory is going to be reclaimed. You know, there is a spiritual war going on. It's a war against life. It's a war against anything that's godly and divine and of true spiritual essence. That is what I see is happening all around, but that's nothing new. The territory and where the battleground really is, if we want to look at it through that lens, is here. It's inside of us. And for as long as the host of self, that I call the will, isn't brought back in, we are not willing. And so the beautiful thing about the will is that the will only works when we are using it. It also works when we're not using it. So if I'm willing to do something, my cells are saying, okay, well, he's willing, we're going. But if I say nothing about whether I am willing or whether I'm not willing, guess what? I'm not willing. And this is a very, and that's not so much about I'm not willing to navigate there. It's like, if I don't say I'm willing to heal, I am not willing to heal. If I don't say I'm willing to transform this life, this soul incarnation, I am willing to bring it in, I'm willing to anchor it in. If I don't say that I am willing my soul to ground and anchor into my core of my body solely, I want to unify my relationship between the ego and the soul. If I don't will that, I don't want it. I'm not willing it. And so this part of the will that I've spoken around in many forms and many aspects has been washed out of the English language. And it's almost like it's so familiar and yet it's hardly spoken of. But it's the definitive factor to positive change. Are you willing to make change? Because what willingness does, and this is about contract law, and the only soulful form of contract law that exists on this earth plane, is that when you're willing, you are contracting yourself and nobody else. You are contracting all of your cells, because what the proclamation of your will is you are giving a divine ordinance and instruction to all of your being. And the beautiful thing is that you can say, okay, well, we just talked about this ego. What if this ego gets hold of the will and says, I'm willing this and I'm willing that, and I'm going to be willing this? Well, the beautiful design of our human nature is that when you are willing, after you are declaring or proclaiming your will, you have to surrender it. Because you can't make shit happen anyways. That's called willpower. And willpower is a totally different thing. That's like brute force driving something to the finish line so that you get somewhere. Hey, it works. It gets you results. It gets you certain results. Willfulness comes with divine grace. That is just intrinsically part of it. Grace is what actually carries your instruction into the fabric of time and space. It is, in more precise terms, feminine grace. It's not masculine grace in the way that we have witnessed that maybe being different. It is a divine feminine gracefulness that carries a proclamation of one's will into the etheric field. And that is not a strong, piercing, penetrative form. No, it's a creational wave. And when we are willing, all of our cells, our eye cells, our brain cells, our ear cells, they all get attuned. I am willing to come into awareness, how to free myself of fill in the blank. Now the ears have received an order to pay attention. If you hear anything coming up around what the host here has willed, record it. The brain cells are aligned. So the ears, the eyes, everything has received an instruction to receive. And if we're not receiving from the external world, to bring from within the awareness up of what we already innately know, but have been maybe afraid to really own, to really look at, to really be with. Everything in the hero's journey and the return to our soulful sovereignty stands and falls with whether we are willing or not. And that's where the journey begins. And I feel for myself that when I went through my process of what I call will awakening, my directional orientation started shifting. And I gravitated out of my old life because I was for the first time able to honor my inner truth. I was able to feel my true north, and I was not able to deny it any longer. And when I did, I started wilting. I started getting into addictions. I started getting into all sorts of misbehavior, so to speak, but it was just performing a function to show me you're not honoring what your inner truth is. And there's a lot of people that are coping with not living in alignment with their inner truth out of fear, out of trauma-based mind control. And your answer out of all of it is just become willing for a different reality, become willing to step into a new territory. And the thing is that is most beautiful about it is that it's not a one-time will choice. It starts with that, but you continuously have to remain willing and then curious, willing and curious. And why the curiosity is because you got to surrender. You got to let yourselves know, I am willing to heal this. I don't know how to heal it, but I'm willing to come into awareness. And so there's a natural surrender that comes with that. And when that surrender happens, which doesn't involve that ego mind, there's a humbling process that happens just before that surrender. And what it does, it harmonizes ourselves with our soul path. It gives an appropriate place to our ego so that we are not just going to have recreations of the past, but we're also able to come from grace with more ease and with more grace. And that's what I feel is the territory and the so-called battleground. It's in here. It's really within ourselves. If we want to change anything in the outer world, it's about getting our will to really become restored.
You know, it's so amazing because what you are describing so beautifully is our gift of free will. You know, we have been told time and time we have been incarnated in a place of free will. And, but then we forget about that. But you just described it to a T. That is what free will is about. And if you remember back, so when we did, you know, our weekly programs, we came across that lovely Dutch phrase where we didn't use the word want. And we would say to a child, rather than what do you want when they are, you know, screaming and yelling, we asked them, what do you will? What will you, darling? And so when you said it's been removed from the English language, absolutely. And so I just sat here with such a big smile on my face because every word you spoke was describing this gift of free will that we have not been able to understand or utilize or implement because we feel that that was stolen from us at birth. Because from the moment that we're born, we have to follow rules. I've never been any good at that. That's, you know, rules and I just don't get on. And if you put a you know, a sign or, you know, these arrows on the road for me to go that way, I'm very likely to be going in the opposite way. It's just the way that I'm. That's not. Don't give me a rule. that because the rules are never aligned with my free will. They're not aligned with this essence of me that is a life force that has a purpose. And so I just love what you've just, this last few moments with you have been just so vibrantly magnificent, because I want people to listen to it again and again and again, because that is the description of how free will is meant to be used within our lives. This willingness, right? Free willingness, my choice to surrender my will, my free will. You know, what was there is a phrase somewhere, my will is thy will, or whatever that thing is. But it is, you know, my will is available to live the highest version of the purpose for my being here.
Mm-hmm.
It is not for anything else. It is not to force you to do something. It is not here to force me to go and buy a trinket. It is here to be available for the highest possibility for myself and all concerned.
Yeah.
It is that utilization of this free will. So thank you so much. What a wonderful time we've had being together once more. Wow.
Okay, huh?
My God, where do we go and what do we bring forth? Thank
Stunning.
you so much. Let's not leave it too long.
Agreed.
What's
Agreed.
going on? Okay, so
Yeah.
thank you. And people, what I'd really like is some comments. And what Shay said before is anything that, you know, if you've got questions that have come up from this discussion, then please put them in the comment box. And that will then give us, you know, some material for, if you love what we do and we love bringing it to you, then yay, let's keep going, because we are on a roll and we are unstoppable. So thank you so much.
All right.
Love you. Love yourself more. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.